Welcome to History's Business. I'm Jeff Worrow. Today we're talking about one of the most influential names in the history of retail. Here's more.
Federated Department Stores. The retail giant was formed in 1929, and at the time, the new company sent the retail world into a tailspin. Created by Fred Lazarus, Federated was a whole new way of thinking, an alliance among former rivals. Brooklyn-based Abraham and Straus, Filene's of Boston, Bloomingdale's of New York, and Ohio's F&R Lazarus. By combining their business interests, the stores gained new financial clout. However, the chains continued to maintain separate identities. Over the decades, Federated prospered from the arrangement and grew to become the nation's largest department store company. In more recent years, they acquired other named stores such as Burdine's of Miami and Rich's of Atlanta. But of all the company's business deals, none had greater impact than the one in 1994. That's when Federated merged with Macy's, the world's largest store.
R.H. Macy opened his first store in 1858, and during his long career revolutionized the way people shop. Today, the Macy's vision is being carried forward by another great name in retail, Terry Lundgren, the chairman and CEO of Federated Department Stores. Terry, it's great to have you with us here on History's Business.
Thanks, Jeff.
Federated has 866 department stores in 45 states. It's America's biggest department store retailer. Is there a sort of defining Macy's spirit, philosophy, and vision?
Well, Macy's is working toward becoming America's department store, Jeff, and that's our vision. And we want to be able to sell affordable luxury to consumers across the nation. That's where we're headed.
And Macy's is really the keystone of Federated, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And when you look at the founder of the company, R.H. Macy, he began his career as a whaler on Nantucket Island, and some historians say that sort of influenced the way, you know, his approach to business and his work ethic. Is that true?
Sure is. This is a young man at 15, left home to become a whaler and was off to sea for 4 years. You know, very young age, on his own, individual spirit, and he came back with this red star tattoo and $500 and began working on his dream.
Now, when he began working on his dream in the 1850s with a dry goods store in Haverhill, Mass., it was pretty bumpy at the outset.
Yes, it was indeed. In fact, he had many business failures before he ultimately opened the Macy's store. So he tried different concepts. He sort of followed each of his dreams, and he never gave up. You know, that's one of the things that we love about the history of R.H., is that he never gave up. In spite of the fact that he had failure after failure. He had about 4 or 5 different businesses, including chasing the gold rush and doing different things in California and coming back to the East Coast. But he always had this vision, and he always had this dream for Macy's. And we're glad he stuck with it.
Despite his early setbacks, he decided to open a sort of high-end dry goods store in New York City in 1858. You know, why? And then, before you answer that, what is a dry goods store?
Right.
For those of us who've sort of forgotten our early American history.
Well, dry goods is not necessarily used anymore, but it's really department stores today. It is non-perishable items. In those days, they sold yarns of fabric, bolts of fabric. They sold ready-made clothes in some cases, but they sold flour. They were almost sort of a general a store, if you will, but it was things that were not refrigerated or things that were not liquid.
And this small, fancy dry goods store he set up in New York City in 1858, was it successful?
Well, it was struggled at first. I think the first year's business did $11,000, but over time he stayed with his concept, and it became successful.
I imagine this changes the way Americans shop, right?
Well, sure, indeed. When this became, as he built on, and when R.H. envisioned this bigger dream of selling everything that the consumer wanted, the store had to become bigger, the assortment had to become wider, and his attempt was ultimately to sell all the products that he could possibly sell to the same core customer.
All under one roof.
All under one roof.
And Macy really revolutionized a number of key marketing and management strategies. Let me mention a few of them and have your comment on
Sure.
them. First, the Red Star logo.
Well, the Red Star logo, this is a great story. This happened when he was a whaler, as I said, when he was a young man. And the rumor, legend has it that he followed a red star when he was lost at sea, and that probably was Mars, I don't know. But he followed the red star to get him back to his home in Nantucket, and that's what sort of guided him, and he put a red tattoo star on his hand after that journey.
What about newspaper ads?
First store to run newspaper ads to sell his products was R.H. Macy, Roland Macy. And again, he was thinking more forward. He really created a reason for newspaper ads to exist. He was really a driver behind the building of newspapers, because the revenue that the newspaper was generating from his advertising allowed them to expand their distribution. Yeah. So very influential.
Colored bath towels.
Right. Well, you know, no one ever thought that bath towels should be anything but white, except for R.H. And he expanded the color palette, and obviously that's where the business is today.
A one-price system.
Yeah, you know, when he had multiple stores, you know, many other retailers had different pricing based on whatever that region would bear.
Or whatever the manager there wanted to charge,
exactly.
Right?
And that was not R.H.'s strategy. He had a one-price policy. If that colored bath towel was $2 in New York City, it was also $2 in the branch store.
Mm-hmm. And hiring and promoting women.
Very important. The first to appoint a senior executive woman to a senior level position. And again, today, half of my direct reports, or more than half of my direct reports, are women, and they're the highest paid people in our company. So he started that trend long time ago, the first one to initiate it, and today it's a critical part of our success.
Okay. In the late 19th century, another giant of retail history comes along, Isidor Straus. Who was he, and why was he notable?
Well, Isidor and his brother Nathan, Jeff, were two young men who were leasing out the china and crystal business in the Macy's store, and they were very successful in doing so. And what happened was they were very close to R.H. Roland Macy, and when Roland died, these two ended up buying his interest in the company. So they were now the new owners at that point in time of Macy's.
And then in 1902, they decided to move to Herald Square, Broadway and 34th Street. Was that regarded as a risky move at the time?
It was. The current Herald Square, Broadway, corner of Broadway 34th, was not very popular in terms of real estate development at that time, so it was a big risk.
And they pitched it as the world's largest store, was it?
It still is. It's over 2 million square feet in total, and it's clearly the largest store in the world.
Terry, we've got to take a short break. Up next, Federated's influence on your Thanksgiving holiday. It's more than the parade. We'll be back in a moment with History's Business.
Did you know Isidor Straus, the co-owner of Macy's during the early 20th century, was traveling on the Titanic when the ship struck an iceberg? Both he and wife Ida died during the tragedy.
Welcome back to History's Business. We're talking about the history of department stores with one of the biggest names in retail, Terry Lundgren, the chairman and CEO of Federated Department Stores. Now, Federated was formed in 1929 in a union of Abraham and Strauss, Filene's, Bloomingdale's, and Lazarus, all very venerable stores. Was this a desperate response to the Wall Street crash, or was it a bold attempt to achieve economies of scale and sort of look to the future?
Well, it's actually what I think allowed these stores to survive during the Wall Street crash, because it allowed all kinds of back office synergies. And so they ran the companies individually and independently, but things like community buying organizations and back office logistics systems and structures were helped by the union of these various regional stores. And that was the dream of the Lazarus family, to think through how to make these independent retailers work together as one.
So they pooled a lot of their logistical functions to achieve those economies of scale. Also purchasing, I imagine. Yeah,
purchasing and many of the back office things and subjects that the customer would not see.
Mm-hmm. Is it true that we owe the tradition of celebrating Thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday in November to Federated Department Stores?
I think that's true, because the heritage of the Federated Department Stores with Fred Lazarus, he contacted Franklin Delano Roosevelt and suggested that having more shopping days between Thanksgiving and Christmas would be good for consumers and good for employees, good for working employees. And so that's how that whole subject took place.
Give you a whole month of shopping days before Christmas.
And I'm grateful for that today.
Now, everybody loves the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. How did that come about?
Well, that was actually a parade from immigrant workers at Macy's wanting to celebrate their traditions, and it began back in 1924. And it's grown, of course, into a nationally marketed and televised program today.
And is this kind of a lost leader for you? I mean, what's in it for Macy's? Is it just sort of a piece of heritage and history, or does it have some kind of marketing function?
Well, I think, you know, when you ask people about the Macy's brand, why do they recognize the Macy's brand if there hasn't been a store in their marketplace, they'll tell you Miracle on 34th Street, they visited New York and went to the largest store in the world, or they've watched the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. So it is clearly an important marketing vehicle for our company.
Well, Terry, it wasn't until 1994 that Federated and Macy's came together. Can you tell me a little bit about the merger?
Sure, and I'll tell you a little story about that, because just before that occurrence, I was the chairman and CEO of Neiman Marcus and living in Dallas, Texas, and I was being recruited to become the next CEO of Macy's. Now, Macy's at that time in 1993 was in bankruptcy, and so it had some appeal, but at the same time I was on top of the world. My business was great. Why do I want to leave this?
Were the Cowboys winning? Or
yeah, the Cowboys. It was the Cowboys were absolutely back on top. Everything was good. My life was good, and so I called a friend of mine who I'd known for a long time, and he was the chairman at that point of Federated, Alan Questrom, and I said, listen, here's what's happening. I mean, I'm not sure about this, but they're talking to me about potentially going to Macy's. What do you think about that idea? He said, I think it's a terrible idea. Why don't you come to Federated and we'll buy Macy's? Long story short, 6 months later, I went to Federated, and because it took me that much time to figure out that I really wanted to do that, and 6 months after that, we bought Macy's.
Yeah, it's interesting. And what kind of a migration is that from Neiman Marcus to Macy's? I mean, is it a different outlook, different strategy?
Yes, indeed. Neiman Marcus at that time had about 33 stores. Today it has 38, 39 stores. It's more similar to Bloomingdale's, which has a similar number of stores. Macy's is a store with over 800 stores. And it's just a matter of who you cater to. And we have a much, much bigger audience for the Macy's brand versus Neiman Marcus or Great Store versus or even our own Bloomingdale's.
You know, running Neiman Marcus or running Macy's, is the day-to-day very similar, or is it an entirely different kind of work running a Macy's as opposed to a Neiman Marcus?
Well, it's different certainly because of scale and size. We have over 200,000 employees, and so what we have to do to continue to communicate effectively with that large-scale group is much more challenging, if you will, than it was to Neiman Marcus, my own Neiman Marcus stores. I used to visit my stores every year. The 35 stores would be not really a problem. I can't visit over 800 stores today.
Let's take a short break right there, Terry. Up next, Terry Lundgren reveals how Macy's is sparking new business in their stores. We'll be back in a moment.
Did you know Macy's annual flower show began in 1946 as a fragrance promotion for the cosmetics department?
Welcome back to History's Business. If you've just tuned in, we're talking with Terry Lundgren, the chairman and CEO of Federated Department Stores. Why do you think department store shopping, I mean, people talk about the crisis of the department store. Why did it lose a lot of the momentum it had in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s?
Well, so much had changed in that time frame. You know, first of all, there's more competition. There was people opening up stores off the mall, and so now new retail formats were competing against us, in many cases carrying similar products. And then a very key component for us is women in the workplace, because 70% of our customer base today is women. They're making the buying decisions in our stores, what products that we sell. And they used to have time to spend a half a day or a day at a store and have 2-hour lunch, and that's over. You know, most women, if they're not working full time, they're raising kids and they're busy and they're time pressed, and that's made a huge difference today. And I think so all of these things have changed the way retailers are working today.
So the department store used to be, historically, was a place where a woman would go in the morning and she'd shop or browse, and then she'd have lunch in the store, and then she'd browse and shop a bit in the afternoon. It was almost a full-day thing.
Correct. And
now they sort of fly in and out, and you got to have the stuff placed strategically so they see it and buy it, right?
Correct.
It's a totally different customer nowadays.
It's very different, you know, and we still have the old tea room, if you will, in some of our very large emporium stores like State Street in Chicago or Herald Square in New York or Union Square in San Francisco and other big stores. But more often we'll have a Starbucks, you know, yeah. So just because of addressing the time crunch that women have today in today's environment.
Right. Target and Walmart, the big box retailers, have moved into your core areas, clothing, accessories. How do you compete with them?
Well, we think very effectively. In our case, we're much more into the fashion business, Jeff, and they're much more into the basic business. These are two extremely good retailers, but we definitely cater to a different quality level of product and styling. And our customers are willing to take more fashion risks, and they tell us that on a regular basis. They expect a certain level of service that we give in our stores. They expect a shopping environment that is definitely different than those two retailers as well as other retailers. So it's quite a bit different shopping experience, and women tell us that on a very regular basis. So we feel very good about our ability to compete.
Okay, so up at the higher end, Bloomingdale's and Macy's, you can add that value. What about down at the middle and lower tiers, like I say, a Foley's, right? How does Foley's compete with the big box stores? Well,
Foley's is going to become Macy's, and they'll be able to benefit from our national advertising program and all of these all of these subjects that I just talked about in terms of fashion and in terms of affordable luxury and the fitting room upgrades. That's going to be in Foley's too. So this is all going to be at Macy's across the country, in Texas where Foley's is, in Boston where Filene's is. All of these stores are going to benefit from the Macy's brand and all of these reinvention of the department store that we finally talk about, making the shopping experience more exciting for our customers.
Has there been any outcry from people that love these old brands and are used to these old brands and don't want to see a name change?
Yes, there has been in some cases, and we went through this before, Jeff. We've already gone through this transformation once. We changed Rich's in Atlanta, which was a very powerful brand name over 100 years old, to the name Macy's a year ago. We changed Burdine's in Florida, which is a very important store there, to the Macy's brand, and we have other examples of this as well. So we've been through it. We've done the research, and certainly, if you ask people, would you like to change or would you like to stay the same, they'll get the answer to that question. But ultimately, the future is really moving forward, and that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to give them a new reason to shop in these stores because with all the competition that you've mentioned before, we have to try new things. We have to experiment with new broad marketing, and we have to make sure that the merchandise that we carry is more unique and done so in an effective way, and that consumers across America, while having regional differences, can find what they're looking for in Macy's across the country.
Terry, I understand that Macy's has just entered into a new relationship with Martha Stewart.
Correct. We're very excited about that starting in 2007, and going forward we're going to have the exclusive products designed by Martha Stewart in all of our Macy's stores, and this is going to be a big and important home furnishings business for our company.
Now, why will this shopper buy the Martha Stewart stuff? Is it because of the name Martha Stewart, or because Martha Stewart finds stuff and designs stuff that's just different than everything else?
Well, we did a lot of research before we made this decision to do this venture with Martha Stewart, and she has a tremendous amount of credibility, specifically in the home furnishings world. So people trust that she's going to make the right product.
Something tasteful.
Something tasteful.
So they won't buy a real howler.
Exactly.
Something that'll fit in nicely, whatever.
Well, and you may have heard that KB Homes did a relationship with Martha Stewart, and they built these homes designed with Martha Stewart and furnished by Martha Stewart. They were the biggest single sellout that KB Homes has had. So, that just kind of gives you an indication of the response of the taste level that she presents.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a short break right there. We'll be right back with Terry Lundgren, the chairman and CEO of Federated Department Stores. Welcome back to History's Business. I'm talking with Terry Lundgren, the chairman and CEO of Federated Department Stores. Let me ask you a half-dozen questions I ask all of my guests, just rapid fire. What's your best moment as CEO?
Well, I'd like to think I haven't experienced it yet.
Yeah, that's the best answer I've ever heard. we live in hope, right?
Right.
Your worst moment as CEO?
Well, probably 9/11. I was on my own, at my own building, and in New York City at Macy's on that day, and saw the smoke, and was there at the moment of the planes going into the building, and so that was the most difficult, I think, time, because I had a great deal of concern for all of our employees and my own family and customers in our buildings and the like, and so that was the hardest day.
Yeah, I think 9/11 was like the Pearl Harbor for our generation. Yeah. An unforgettable day. And Terry, what's your #1 rule for success?
Surround yourself with great people. And I've done that. I feel I've got such a great team of people, and I sleep well at night as a result of that.
And if your main competitor were seated here right now next to you, what would you guys be talking about?
I'd be talking about the weather.
Don't want to give anything away, right?
Not a thing.
What do you do when you're not being CEO?
Well, I've got 2 beautiful daughters that are in college, and I spend time with them. I've got a wonderful wife, and I spend time with her, and I like to golf.
Okay. And what historical figure could best run Federated Department Stores?
Well, I think Teddy Roosevelt has demonstrated, the passion that's required to be successful in our business. So many, changes in his own entrepreneurial way, the things that he accomplished in his life as well as in his presidency. I think he'd be a good fit.
Well, Terry Lundgren, CEO of Federated Department Stores, thanks so much for joining us today on History's Business.
Thanks, Jeff.
Hope you've enjoyed it too. If you missed a portion of today's show, you can download the conversation at history.com. Just click on Speeches and Video and search for History's Business. For the History Channel, I'm Jeff Waro. See you next week.